something that we need to learn to treat with great respect and reverence. If we had Jesus Christ himself sitting here at the front of the room, how would we act about him? Well, physically, he's not here. We know he's here spiritually. But we have a physical representation of Jesus on the table. It is the bread. It is the cup. Together, those two elements represent Jesus, the Christ. So we need to learn to start treating them with great respect and with great reverence. Communion is not just something, we're going to do it now because it's Sunday and this happens to be that Sunday. No, it's something that we enter into. It's something that we come to. When we partake of the communion table, it's not something that we should just be lightly dancing along and saying, okay, good. Yes, this is part of our spiritual food. So partaking of the communion table is a necessary part of the Christian life. This natural bread that we eat can show the truth that we need Jesus. So the very first thing we want to look at, I said the word bread is the natural bread. Well, the Bible says man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. So when we look at the bread here, we are reminded that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Well, what is the word that proceeds? Jesus. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So the very first thing we see about the bread is that it is part of the Christ that we believe in. Now the second type of bread that is mentioned in the Bible is what we refer to as the miraculous bread. Now even though the miraculous bread was a natural bread, it was used for physical sustenance, the bread was also God's supernatural supply from heaven. When the Israelites, not when the Egyptians left Israel, they never left as far as I know. When the Israelites left Egypt, they found themselves in the desert without food. They began to cry out, and God miraculously met their needs by giving them, according to Exodus 16:14, thin flakes like frost on the ground. He sent manna. He sent bread. God miraculously supplied natural bread for the Israelites to eat. Now another place of miraculous bread is found in Matthew chapter 14, 19 to 21. And we have the story of how Jesus fed the multitude supernaturally using natural food. 5 loaves of bread, 2 fishes. Jesus fed more than 5,000 people. Well, this was a supernatural supply. This was a supernatural. I heard about one professor that was trying to do away with this. He says, the loaves of bread were bigger in those days. It was a little boy's lunch. They ate more too, didn't they? But that's just, again, it's just the world trying to explain away the supernatural of God. So Jesus used 5 loaves, 2 fishes, and he ended up feeding more than 5,000 people. Well, you know and I know that in normal situations, 5 loaves of bread are not going to come close to feeding more than 5,000 people. I don't care where you buy your bread. That's not going to do it. I don't care where maybe you can find fish. 2 fish might do it. But you're not going to see a little boy carrying those 2 fish. So the second place where bread is mentioned, it speaks about the miraculous bread. The bread was miraculous bread here in these instances. This was bread that was supernatural, was provided beyond and above and over and above everything we could think or imagine. Well, we don't have to think long to recognize that Jesus was miraculous bread. He's the word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Jesus was miraculous. Not one of us deserved salvation. Not one of us had any right to expect God to move on our behalf. And yet he miraculously sent his provision. He took the sins of the world and put them on Jesus. He took the pain. He took the sicknesses. He took the diseases. He put them on Jesus. He hung them on the cross. And then he gave us the benefit of it. That's miraculous provision. The wages of sin is death. Every one of us deserved to go to hell. But not one of us has to. The price has been paid that we don't have to. The third kind of bread that is mentioned in the Bible is the unleavened bread. The unleavened bread was used for the Passover. Exodus chapter 12 verse 17 says, "And you shall observe the feast of the unleavened bread, for in this selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall you observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever." When does forever quit? It doesn't. It keeps going. So the celebration of eating the unleavened bread in observance of the Passover was a type, a shadow of that which was to come. Now we know that when Jesus is walking with his disciples, he says, "I want to have Passover with you." He was celebrating Passover. You know, we often think, well, Jesus was busy celebrating the first communion. Well, he did that, but he was celebrating the Passover so that the law could be fulfilled. When Jesus went into that upper room with his 12 disciples, when he got to that place and he broke the bread, he washed their feet, he broke the bread, he served them the bread, he served them the wine. He wasn't saying this is our communion. He said we're doing Passover now. We're keeping the ordinance of the way it was. But then in his death, he ended up connecting the Passover of the old covenant with the communion of the new covenant. So the Christian church is now able to celebrate communion. We don't need to be celebrating Passover. Our communion includes everything that Passover included and more. It was a new and it was a better covenant. But the third type of the bread that was mentioned was the unleavened bread. So just like God delivered Israel from Egypt at the hand of Moses, God delivered us from slavery to sin through Jesus Christ. Moses spoke to the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh had his heart hardened. He ended up letting the people go. They got out. The armies chased them. We know the story. They got to the sea closed up and wiped away all the, and again you hear these people say, well, the water wasn't so deep. That's why they got to walk across. Well, how do you drown armies in water that's not very deep? Even if they can't swim. But again, it was just trying to figure out. Well, the Bible says that the walls of water stood up and they parted and they walked through on dry ground. The Egyptians chased them. The world was busy chasing God's people, and it got drowned under the water. And God says, from now on, remember, this is the Passover. Make this an ordinance forever. Have the unleavened bread. This is the time. This is the place. Well, in the very same way, when Jesus died on the cross, he made the way for us to pass over. We passed over. We came out of the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. We were translated from death to life instantly, the moment we accepted the sacrifice. The unleavened bread. Our Jesus represents the unleavened bread to us. So God commanded Israel to remember their deliverance by observing the feast of the unleavened bread. He has commanded us to remember our deliverance by partaking of communion. As oft as ye do this in remembrance of me. So we are remembering our deliverance as we come to the table. We are remembering that we were sinners, but we were set free. We are remembering that our bodies were broken, but we've been made whole. We are remembering that Jesus was the sacrifice for us. That he was wounded for our transgressions. That he was bruised for our iniquities. That by his stripes we were made whole. We're remembering that as we come to the communion table. It's the blood. It's the body. A fourth type of bread mentioned in the Bible is the showbread. Well, the showbread was holy. It was kept in the tabernacle so that the priests could use it in their offerings to the Lord. According to Leviticus 24 verse 8, it says, "This bread is to be set out before the Lord regularly."